Hi, my dearest family. Today we are going to be looking at the Lover's card from an astrological perspective. Well, often what happens with this card is that we tend to be associating this card with love. But it's not always something to do with that. By the way, the Lovers, this is the Arcanum 6, and it's traditionally associated with the sign of Gemini. Its ruling planet, therefore, is Mercury. While popular culture often simplifies this card as purely romantic, from a technical perspective, it's actually a representation of the conscious choice, the duality of the mind, rather than anything to do with love. So just be very mindful about that. I remember the very first time when I pulled this card back a good 23 years ago, and I really remember wanting to represent love, but well, it was nowhere near. So, on one hand, the core archetype of this card is the power of choice. The lovers depicts a conscious decision. It is the moment the ego moves from kind of like a singular identification towards more of a duality. It's the twin archetype, really. It's the integration of oppositions, balancing the conscious, which is more the masculine, the analytical side of the brain, and the subconscious, which is the feminine, the intuitive minds. Yes, it could represent about union as well, where we are uh, kind of like an internal alignment of values, but with action. Now, when you think of why it is a Gemini or a Mercury connection, well, Mercury is about analytical discrimination. Gemini processes data to understand the world. The Lover's card required us to analyze two distinct paths or options, and we have to make a decisions about that. Also, when we have got two people sitting next to each other, then there is an information exchange happening. So this card serves as a reminder that every choice requires communication, either with the self or between parties. And the duality of information as well. Gemini is like the sign of the two sides of the coin, basically. So the lover's card emphasizes that every choice has a consequence. So to choose one path is to relinquish the other. So do you let me know in the chat box below, by the way, how do you see the lover's card? Did you always associate it with love and relationship questions, or did you actually know that it has got something to do with choice? But I also would like to invite you to look at a relocation with me in my upcoming 16-week course. It's going to start on the 31st of May, and I think this is a must. It's going to be teaching you exactly how to check where to live a happy life. More details on my website, AstroViktor.com, and you will be able to see the syllabus there as well, exactly what we are going to be learning about. But let's go back to our archetype of the lover's card. So, the lovers and Gemini is deeply rooted in the concept of discrimination. Gemini, as the third sign of the zodiacal circle, is where the mind begins to categorize the environment. In the tarot, the lovers represents the age of reason, the developmental stage where the individual realizes that they are no longer just an observer, but they are an active participant, and therefore it means that they have to choose. So it carries that mutable quality with it. The lovers is rarely static. It indicates the state of flux. It signifies a period of transition where the querent is testing different versions of their own identity or direction or even love life as well. But it is always connected to movements. So maybe you pull this card or you draw this card in a professional settings, right? Then maybe you are offered two career path. maybe one high-paying job role, which might be giving you the stability, or maybe you are receiving a creative freelance project, which you have always wanted to do. So you have to be choosing between stability and your dreams. So the lover's card here signifies that Gemini dilemma that we are talking about. It's not necessarily about which job is better, but which path aligns with your current intellectual and personal development. I think when you receive this card, you have to be listing the data, map the consequences of each choice, and let's use that Mercury kind of like ruled card to maybe interview the key players in both roles before you actually deciding. Now, the magician was also a Gemini card too, right? We have spoken about, that was the very first card we have actually spoken about. So, what is the similarities and what are the differences between these two cards? Because they kind of like share the same elemental and planetary DNA from an astrological point of view. And the magician, which is Arcanum 1, it is more about the process. It is the active application of the intellect, the willpower, and the skills. You can think of it as Mercury being kind of like the conductor here. It is the ability to take that raw material, because we have got the four suits of the minor arcana on the table, and then focusing on the specific goals. So here, Mercury is a bit more of an agent, an initiation. It is about skills. Now, in the Lover's card, it is more about the context. It is the representation of the environment in which we make choices, the duality of our experiences. Here, the Gemini function is more to do with the synthesizer. It is the ability to weigh the information, comparing the data that we've got, and then we make a decision and then we commit to a path. So here that Mercury ruled element is more about discernment, alignment, choice, duality. I think the magician card pretty much says that I have the tools and the power to make this happen. While the lover's card says I have the awareness to choose which path is right for me. So I think in the magician card, it's more of an architect mode. It is about how to apply those talents that are laying right in front of me and how it's going to be, let's say, serving my new project. While in the lover's card, this is more about the analyst mode. It is about looking at what and why we are doing. So if a client is asking about a new project, this card actually confirms the need to prioritize the values before starting it. And then if we have got the magician card, it says you've got every single skills actually you need to be able to launch that new project. Maybe a client is very overwhelmed by too many tasks and feels like that they are losing focus. So if the magician appears, the advice is that they have to reclaim their identity. You know, they have to they have to identify which task is primary project and dedicate that willpower to execute only that. The lovers, if it appears, the advice is to evaluate the tasks themselves. Are those tasks aligned with your soul's growth, with your current goals? So that's where it's a call for discernment. So now we can see though that on that card we have got a male and a female with quite a huge divine figure on top of them. So what does that really mean? Well, that divine figure is actually Raphael, the archangel of air. So that's another reason why it's actually an air card. Well, in Western occult traditions, Raphael is the archangel associated with the element of air. So this reinforces that Gemini quality that I've already mentioned. So that's the sign of intellect, communication, the bridge between two worlds. He represents the higher mind there, the super conscious, really. We can see that they are, he is positioned above the couple, so he is overseeing the decisions that these two people are going to be making. So, in a reading, this kind of suggests that the choice being made is not purely impulsive or ego driven. It is kind of indication of a higher perspective, or we are guided towards a choice. And maybe we are guided towards a negative choice, but it has to happen that way, that way. Now we see a male and a female. So we are seeing Adam and Eve, which is the ultimate duality anyway. So they would represent the anima and the animus. One is the unconscious, the other one is the conscious masculine part of things. Pretty much, they were the first couple, but they were born from the same person. So they are kind of like twins. So they actually represent the split that occurs when the mind begins to analyze. It's me versus others, the choice versus a choice B, basically, the feeling and the thinking element. They are naked, so they are actually the representation of innocence and transparency. The choice, while it's difficult, must be made with a lot of honesty, because there is no hiding from the consequence of that decision. And we see that the energy flows down from the divine. So that's Raphael to the couple. So it signifies that that intellect is the catalyst that allows the couple to harmonize. So the lovers is about moving from the garden to that real world, really. And to choose, one must acknowledge the duality, accept the guidance of the higher mind, and then commit to that path. And we know that Eve made that choice. So we know the biblical story behind it. So if this card appears, we might have to ask the question, are you looking at the divine, or are you only looking at kind of like the conflicts, the dilemma, the other person, and so forth? We can actually see that the couple, the male and the female, are not looking at each other. They are looking towards their respective realm, really. So they are not necessarily dependent on each other. It's not important how they relate to each other. So if Raphael is the messenger of air, then how does the message change the decision the couple is about to make? That could be the question there, And if you were the messenger, what information would you provide the couple to help them choose? So that might be something that you want to be talking about. Gemini is actually about duality. It represents the good and the bad side of things. So the good side is that we are able to see both sides of an issue without being biased. Maybe we are able to hold two opposing ideas in the mind simultaneously so that we can create a new one. From a communicational perspective, it's truth, it's wit, it's clarity. The shadow side of Gemini, it's being two-faced. Not necessarily malicious, but slightly bit scattered, fickle, unreliable. Or we just want to justify what we say, but we don't hear what others are saying to us. It can show superficiality. So, with the lovers as well, it's all about the integration of the shadow and the light. It shows that we have got two choices, but it also represents that the good and bad, come together. So to reach the divine, which is represented by the angel, we must acknowledge both the shadow and the light side of that card as well. We cannot choose a path if we ignore the bad, the consequences. We cannot just obsess over only over the good, you know. So that's also another, you know, the other thing is Mercury is often associated with being the trickster, right? So think of a time you were presented with a good choice and a bad choice. So did you actually have a choice between good and bad, or was it just a choice between two equally challenging truths, but one was labeled with good and the other one was labeled as bad? And then how did it make your decision easier, you know? So the real mastery of the lovers is realizing that life is rarely good versus evil. It is usually around the truth and the comfort. So you might be wondering why this card is called Lovers then. Because you would think that this is connected to love, right? And that's the most common friction when this card pops up. Well, the name is actually more of a legacy issue. In the oldest tarot traditions, which often is considered to be the Tarot of Marseille, the card was often referred to as the lover, the le choice, or whatever ways to pronounce it. I don't speak French. I'm sorry about that. And the image was actually representing or depicting a happy couple. But in older cards, there was a young man standing between two women, symbolizing the choice between virtue and wisdom in a way. So, lover is one who feels a magnetic pull, right? So, the Gemini is the sign of the twins, the two sides of the self. Therefore, lover is not necessarily a romantic partner, it's just part of the self that is attracted to a specific path. Um, Maybe you want to call this card more of like the alignment rather than the lover. You know, it's like falling in love with a path or a job. You know, then what do you experience? You experience certain type of alignment. You are aligned with that choice but when you feel torn between two paths, you are experiencing the pain of separation, just like the twins, for example, would do so, or when you are getting divorced from a partner. You know, and then when you think that love is a commitment, you know, true love, you know, is the ability to commit to one path fully and completely, while accepting that the other path, you know, is a loss in a way. So I think it's called the lover because it shows the moment of commitment to one direction. You know, in older pre-Rider-Waite imaginary, this was purely the card of choice, and actually it was called as choice as well. So, but for some reason it got changed, and then it is now called as the lover. But it's rarely something to do with love. You know, you can also see that that angel has got wings. So therefore, it's the winged messenger, another sign of Mercury, right? And the wings represents motion. So the intelligence is in motion. And that is again another sign that it's showing that it's connected to the air element. Um, and you know, Mercury was in classical mythology, Hermes. That's the Greek equivalent of Mercury in Roman mythology, is actually like depicted with winged sandals or even a winged hat. He was the only god, the psychopomp, who could travel between boundaries. So he was able to travel between the living and the dead, the gods and the humans. So that's where also the polarity is actually coming from. You know, also we see fruits on the cards as well, and we see trees as well. So there is an environment there. So the trees actually, this tree features 12 flames. So that's actually the representation of the 12 signs, and it represents vitality, spirit, and the active energy as well. Um, the tree is actually a tree of knowledge, and it's on the right side of the female. So actually, the tree shows five apples. Number five is connected to the five senses and also with the physical world. It also has the serpent, symbolizing the subconscious, the wisdom. So it's a bit of a Venusian or the lunar side of the card as well. It represents the desire to know something, to be in connection with the material world. And also, it might be the representation of temptation, of course, Apple, but it also shows something to do with growth as well. And the fruit is also about harvest. So the harvest of decision. It's a potential that is waiting for us to be harvested. So it shows that every single choice that we make in life has got kind of like a ripening process. Potentially, it shows that we cannot necessarily force the outcome. We must plant the seed. We have to be tending those seeds. We have to wait for the decision or the results of our decision. We have to be taking care of it. We have to protect it as much as possible, and it should be bringing a good outcome. So we also see snake, and the snake is not necessarily evil here. It is more to do with the instinctual, perceptive side of our intelligence. It's the part of the brain that detects danger, but also seeks pleasure and all those type of things. So when the snake appears in the tree of knowledge, it signifies that our choices are often driven by instinctual, kind of sensory needs before they ever reach the conscious mind. And those 12 flames, point out that the man is standing before the tree of life. So this signifies that the choices are operating kind of on a macro level. And maybe it shows that this person is trying to align with their soul's purpose. So you see, when you are looking at um, a card with a lot of details, you can really drag out a lot more information from a card when you are kind of like just reading up the meaning of that. That's the reason why I love tarot cards, because it's kind of like a symbolic language, and every single piece drawn on that card is there for a reason. Okay, what else do we see on that card? We've spoken about them being naked, which is, of course, representation of purity. We also see the kind of like a cloud there, right? Or, well, that's an aura of the divine. That's the cloud of glory. It's very typical for the Rider-Waite-Smith imaginary. And if the angel is the messenger, the cloud is actually the signal being sent to someone. But it might be also the representation of collective unconscious as well. It kind of reminds us that the decision is out there in the clouds. We're just going to have to be able to download them. I feel like it's also somehow telling us above and below from a geometry point of view. I think the cloud represents the higher self, what we can imagine, where we can be, and the figures actually represent our lower self. And the angel is pretty much the path between them two. We can also see that the colors are very yellow and gold related. And these are the colors of intellect and vitality. Um, we also see mountains underneath them, right? So, which is also very interesting. And I mean, we do, I would call it as a mountain of maturity. So, from the garden, we kind of go to the peak, right? So the garden is lush and soft and immediate, and the mountain is barren, hard. sometimes represents something distant. Um, so am I going, the mountain represents that we have to be able to climb something. We see the card from the view from above, really. So, and remember that Mercury is the only one who is able to navigate these peaks. So the mountain reminds us that the higher perspective requires a lot of effort, a lot of climb, but it's super worth it, basically. Notice how the mountain often like or appears as a split or a barrier behind the couple. So it also shows that our path is often lonely, you know. We don't have to stand together. We have to be as like we have to face that ascent individually. We cannot drag others, you know, into our kind of like drama, basically. What's interesting here is, of course, the mountain is smaller than the humans or the creature, right? So that is just showing us that it is looked from above to down. And the archangel is massively big because it represents the only thing that matters in this moment is that internal process of choice. And the mountains are very distant because they are representing the long-term consequences. So I hope this helps you guys to understand the Lover's card a little bit closer. Oh, one other thing is, this is number six. So when we add 1 plus 2 plus 3, then we are going to be getting number 6. Number 6 is the number, like the number of harmony and choice. Think of the hexagram, for example, the Star of David. Star of David is ruled by Mercury. So that's another reason why this is a Mercurian card. Um, but let me not talk about number 6 as much because I'm not here to kind of talk about numerology and I'm not necessarily the best on that. But when we add 1 plus 2 was plus 3 together, obviously we get number 6. So it somehow, this card contains the magician, the high priestess, and the empress as well. So it feels like this is the integration of the will, the intuition, and the creation into a conscious decision. So, guys, thank you very much for being here. I hope this helps. And next time, we're going to talk about the chariot, card number 7. Take care, everyone, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.